All too often, my nights would end with a freezing walk to the nearest payphone to reach out to a friend for some help. My car was a piece of shit. To be brief and spare you the mechanical jargon, it had a nasty habit of dying on me. Being a resident of the more mountainous regions of the country, this was a death sentence come winter. The snowy roads that cut through the wilderness had long distances between cities. You could drive for miles and miles without ever seeing a sign of another human. If you were unfortunate enough to experience some car trouble along the way, you'd have quite the long and potentially treacherous walk before you reached any civilized portion of the landscape. Luckily for me, I was located in Baker, a small town with a great community and everything you'd need to get by. A gas station, schools, even a few stores. So I didn't need to drive around much anyways. Baker is a quaint little place where people tired of the mundane city life dream of vacationing. The beauty of the rural landscape could fill 1,000 art galleries. Great as this town is, it's only great as a vacation destination. Being such a simple place, Baker doesn't offer its residents much. For me, growing up in a small rural town wasn't all that I could have ever hoped for. I wanted to see towering skyscrapers, colossal stadiums, and experience the spectacular flashy lifestyle of big cities like LA or New York. I was stuck in Baker though. I was 22 and working in an oil field. I didn't have some promising job that would send me all over the world, or even out of the state for that matter. College was a no-go, since my parents were working class, and the nearest college was hundreds of miles away from Baker anyway. Things seemed rather bleak for me. Until just a few weeks ago, when an old childhood friend of mine, Dave, had reached out to me. Somehow, Dave had made it out of Baker, put himself through school, and through some kind of business venture had done quite well for himself. Now financially established, he was going to open a small diner in the much larger city of Billings. I couldn't believe it. I can still vividly remember our childish conversations around the Nintendo 64 about the experiences we were going to have once we got out of Baker. At that time, our naive promises had no real weight. But Dave stuck true to his dream, and he made it happen. Beyond that, after all this time, Dave had not forgotten about me. The diner was set to open in less than a week, so Dave invited me to travel to Billings as soon as possible. Although it was a crappy fry cook job at an even cheaper wage than I was currently getting paid, the prospect of traveling to a big city to work with an old friend was not a proposal I was about to wait on. After all, Billings had colleges and so many more people to meet. The probability of finding an actual career or finding someone to start a relationship with was an actual possibility now. I understand how wishful my thinking was to anyone who hadn't come from a similar background. But coming from a place where opportunities like this were few and far between, this was the break that I had been dreaming of. Since Billings was a little over 225 miles away, I thought it would be a good idea to ask a local friend to drive me there, instead of risking it in my own beat-up car. He agreed, although a little bitter out of envy that I too had made it out of Baker. Later on that night, my ride, Jacob, some family and friends, and myself had a little get-together. A going-away party of sorts. As the party died down, Jacob and I sat together on my front porch. He confessed to me that he didn't want me to go. Even though we didn't hang out much anymore, I understood. Good friends were hard to come by in a small town like Baker. I would have been salty about it too, if things were the other way around. The next morning, I knew that the next conversation between Jacob and I would be pretty awkward, on account of the whole sappy, alcohol-induced, I'm gonna miss you talks we exchanged with each other. Regardless of all that, my anticipation for new life experiences overshadowed my apprehension. I gave Jacob a call at around 4 p.m. I expected him to be just getting off work, but to my surprise, he was still seemingly drunk from last night. He began to berate me, put me down. "You'll be back, you loser. You'll come back and I won't be here for you," he said. I slammed the phone back on the receiver and went to my room. I was so angry at his selfishness that I rounded up my things and threw them into my own car. I didn't care if my clunker made it or not. I was at least going to be out of here. With all of my belongings packed up and ready to go, I started up my car and I began the 200-plus mile trek to Billings. It was around 5:30 p.m. Since the sun set an hour earlier than that in the winter, it looked like I was going to be making this drive in the dark. The thick snow that blanketed the surrounding landscape only further contributed to the riskiness of the situation. After about 20 minutes or so of driving in my calculated, angry state, I settled myself down and recalled that this was a turning point in my life, and as such, should be welcomed with a pleasant, peaceful journey. I put my anger behind me, reclined my seat a bit, and put on some soft music. Suddenly, the trip became a therapeutic godsend. I was not even thinking of the new, exciting opportunities that awaited me in Billings. I just sat down, shut up, and appreciated the tranquility of it all. Before I knew it, I had arrived in Forsyth to fuel up and get a quick bite to eat. I had left home in such a hurry that I hadn't even gotten the chance to eat anything before I headed out. Satisfied from a nice hot meal, I hit the road, ready to tackle the remaining 100 miles or so left on my trip. Conditions were decent, and my car was performing much better than I ever could have hoped for. After driving uphill for quite some time though, that was no longer the case. The weakening sound of my waning engine snapped me out of my euphoric state and brought about the gravity of the whole situation. Instantly, I processed all of the factors going on. The snow, lack of an emergency cell phone, and the immense emptiness of my surroundings. My mind raced as I racked through my thoughts, trying to remember the last time I'd even seen a car. Not since Forsyth, about 40 miles back. Not a single car or person since then. My stomach dropped, revealing the surprisingly deep void in my gut. Immediately, it had all come to me. This wasn't some insincere teenage statement you make to your parents by running away, just to come home a pathetic 20 minutes later. This was a full-scale, absolute, life-threatening situation. there was a very real potential that I could die out here. My terror escalated as I counted all of the possibilities, to the point where I found myself again afraid of childhood fears like the dark and monsters. A mere 8 miles after my epiphany, my car let out a thud and then sputtered to a slow winding death. There, my car and I sat, in the middle of the road, in a blackened forest. The gentle, rhythmic pitter-patter of the snow pellets appeased me into a hypnotic state of shock for a minute, maybe more. Gradually, the creeping cold that began to envelop me awoke me from my episode of comatose. Pellet by pellet, it came back to me again. Reality. The danger. The fear. After some time had passed, I realized that I didn't have time to be frozen by fear anymore. The time had come to establish a plan and act on it. The first part of my plan was to clear my car off the road. The visibility was quite terrible by this point. The last thing I wanted was for some innocent traveller to smash into my obstacle of a car, rendering the both of us helpless out here. I removed my seatbelt, grabbed my jacket and hopped out of the car. Upon examination of the scene, I saw that I was on a slight incline, so negotiating this maneuver in the snowy blitz would prove to be quite difficult. I placed my car in neutral, and I began to slowly glide the car towards the side of the road. The weight of the vehicle and the slipperiness of the sleet-laden road caused me to begin to lose my footing. Now, running backwards at nearly full speed, I stumbled and I lost my shaky grip on the car. I fell to the ground on my back, and quickly I sat up to turn and witness what would become of my vehicle. In the darkness, all I could see was the reflection of the moonlight on my car's glossy, white exterior. The car bulldozed on and continued to accelerate down the slope until finally being swallowed whole by the darkness of the night. I heard it continue to wind down the hill, followed by the violent sound of a distant impact. I got up and I ran over to the grisly sight. With the aid of my flashlight, I found that my vehicle had ended its ride at the trunk of a large tree. In my survivalist state, I did my best not to dwell too much on the carnage that I had just witnessed. My next move was to gather my most essential supplies from the vehicle and establish a safe way to wait for a passerby. I must have known in the back of my mind that my car wouldn't make it, because I had brought tons of water, hand warmers, flashlights, a magnesium fire starter, rope, you name it. I tried to pop open the trunk, but the wreck had destroyed it, so I moved inside the car to gain access via the back seat. I folded down the seats and I reached my arm through the opening, retrieving my backpack of survival gear. Amidst this terrifying trial I was facing, I managed somehow to appreciate the surprisingly decent job that I had done in prep. Everything was neatly contained and readily accessible from this one bag. Since I was alone and with relatively few supplies, I knew that staying inside the car was a bad move. The snowfall was getting worse, and I knew that nobody would ever find me if my car was completely engulfed by the snow. My best course of action was to wait outside my car, try to stay warm until I could flag someone down. So that's exactly what I did. For over 2 hours, I sat in the blistering cold, and I waited for any sign of another person. But not a single living creature passed me by. This land was completely vacant. I was losing hope. I couldn't sit here and wait for much longer. I can't say I was surprised. I knew as soon as my car had died that I had made a fatal mistake, and that this was going to be a fight for my life. But I have got to say, it's a frightening thing to see your car begin to vanish right in front of you, little by little. If I had foolishly chosen to stay in my car for this long, there's a chance that I never would have made it out of that vehicle alive. I was done sitting. It was time to move on. If nobody was going to find me, then I was going to find them. I decided to start the trek back towards Forsyth. I thought that maybe I had seen a small rest stop just about 6 miles up the road. Making that kind of a hike for me would have been difficult in the best of conditions, and given the current circumstances, this was destined for failure. But it was much better than just sitting there, waiting around to die. The first mile was easy. I was in full-on survival mode. I couldn't be bothered by any other thoughts. I was only thinking about what I needed to do next. I needed to trudge on, find some way of contacting a loved one to come to my dire need of rescue. But my transition from survival mode back to normal scared mode and worried mode was coming through in waves. Terrified for a brief moment or two. Then the horror would be cast out by my subconscious in order to make a productive effort at survival. Nearing the second mile, I found myself again at the afraid end of the cycle. The adrenaline had departed far sooner than I was comfortable with. The expansive darkness that I found myself in was so unlike its daytime counterpart that it seemed an entirely different world. As a result, I found myself like a baby, scared of the unknown qualities of an unfamiliar new world. In the daytime world, I knew that monsters, ghosts, and all things supernatural did not exist. But under the veil of snow, and shrouded by the intense absence of light, I just didn't know that with certainty anymore. Walking down the absent street, I swayed my flashlight from left to right. First, checking the foreground, then pushing my sight as far back into the brush as my flashlight would allow. From left to right, I repeated this process for 3.5 miles, with nothing to occupy my thoughts but stories of ghosts, zombies, killers, and other staples of the horror genre. Each time I brought my flashlight to the opposite side, I flinched in fear of what my eyes might meet. After about 3.5 miles down the road, I had seen nothing. Until finally, my eyes laid upon an amazing scene. About 300 yards off the side of the road sat a small, dimly lit cabin. The billowing cloud of smoke that rose above the house's chimney was such a sight for sore eyes that I could almost feel the warmth from this far away. In utter excitement that my trip could potentially end over 2 miles sooner than I had projected, I made a mad dash for the cabin. As I drew nearer to the small structure, details that had been unseen from afar began to come increasingly visible. The house was in a pretty advanced state of disrepair. The home was slouching to one side and its wood was heavily distressed. I was beginning to fear that this place was abandoned. But then I remembered that the fireplace was lit. Someone had to have been inside. This realization frightened me even more, because whoever or whatever was in this dwelling was obviously not the owner. No homeowner could allow their house to become so crippled with neglect. I was just scaring myself, I thought. I needed to pull it together. My next hope beyond this at finding someone was over 2 miles up the road, and I didn't know how long I could handle the freezing weather. I pushed my fear aside and doubts deep down inside me, and I mustered up the courage to knock on the door. I shuddered in pain as a sliver of the decrepit wood splintered into my fist. I shut my eyes tight as I attempted to pull the fragment from my hand. After a few seconds of gnawing, I opened my eyes and I realized that the door was already cracked open. I was sure that nobody had answered the door. Surely they would have said something. Seeing the decaying state of the home, I realized that I may have accidentally broken their door. Balling up my fist in my sweater for protection, I proceeded to knock on the much sturdier doorframe this time, and I got to work conjuring up an apology for damaging the place. Much to my surprise, nobody came. Seconds turned to minutes. Knocking turned to pounding. And calling became pleading. I walked around outside the home, investigating to see if maybe there were any other signs that someone was there. But still, nobody responded to me. The house was empty. Within 10 minutes of arriving on the property, I was beginning to contemplate just walking in. If someone were to stumble upon my home in similar circumstances, and them getting inside could have meant the difference between life and death, then I would have understood. Besides, just look at this place, I said to myself. Whoever's staying here probably doesn't even belong here. What's the difference if I squat here too? At least long enough to get myself warm, so that I can make the long trip to the next rest stop. I continued to rationalize with myself. 5 minutes later, I just couldn't resist anymore. After loudly announcing, "I'm coming inside, it's an emergency," I carefully pushed open the creaky door and stepped on in. Immediately, a wall of warmth embraced me, and not long after, so did the smell. This place certainly was abandoned. It smelled like the people who lived here before had gone without cleaning the fridge or taking their pets with them. My face contorted in disgust. and I scrunched my nose in an effort to ward off the putrid stench. I swung my head from side to side, searching for the source of this grotesque smell. My slow, methodical footsteps came to a standstill when I realized the horrifying environment that I had found myself in. Strange jewels and pendants were abundant. All over the coffee table lay gemstones and trinkets. Mysterious patterns of blood droplets filled pages scattered throughout the room. At the farthest wall, opposite the front door, stood a large shrine with an indecipherable character at its peak. Candles, pages, and other offerings accompanied the perplexing altar. Taking in the scenery, I tried my best not to theorize where the aroma might be coming from. Honestly, I didn't really want to know. My limited knowledge of the occult, witches, and all things supernatural was only from what I had seen in horror films and those silly late-night History Channel specials. But I was absolutely certain that whatever was going on in this house was not something I wanted any kind of involvement in. Standing in the middle of the small room, I peered around for a phone. Along with the horrifying scene of bloodied manuscripts and other occult paraphernalia, I observed that the house was lit only by the fireplace and some candles. I concluded that it would be foolish to continue my search, as the house most likely did not have any running electricity. I didn't complain. I was just glad that I had yet another excuse to get the hell out of here. By this time, I had more than enough justification to turn around and just freeze my ass off in even the worst of blizzards. Suddenly, I heard a loud slam. I jumped. My heart was pounding faster than I ever knew it capable of, and I whipped my head around to see what had caused the noise. The rhythmic crunch of feet on the snow scurrying away from the door filled my ears. I tensed up and attempted to process what was going on. Immediately, I realized that I didn't need to know what was going on. I just needed to run. I spun around and sprinted for the exit. A sensational feeling of satisfaction overwhelmed me as a shoulder barge reduced the feeble door to pieces. Keeping all of my momentum, I flew out of the dreadful dwelling. In an instant, that feeling was replaced by pain and terror as a hand emerged from the doorway and grabbed a hold of my head. The sharp, brittle nails buried themselves deep inside my scalp and extracted a handful of hair and tissue. Its tearing jerk on my head pulled me back, causing me to lose all forward momentum. I fell to my back, striking the porch staircase with such force that all wind was sucked from my body in an instant. Panicked, I shot up to my feet, turned around, and threw a punch with all of the vitality I had left in me. In the small snapshot of time before my strike reached its target, my eyes caught a glimpse of the thing. Its form was similar to a tall woman, about 6 feet. The hair was matted and it thrashed about. The arms were disproportionately long for its already tall body. The hands too, thin, slender. They dripped with blood from the havoc it had just wreaked on my scalp. Although I only saw the abomination for a mere fraction of a second. My ability to recount its details is a testament to just how awful its appearance was. Finally, my fist clashed with its face, and it dropped to the floor. Immediately after impact, I turned around and ran back to the road that I had been walking on. I ran with such vigor and determination that I almost didn't recognize myself. Even in dire circumstances of life and death, I don't think anyone else has ever dug down as deep as I had that night. I maintained a full sprint for the remaining 2.5 miles until arriving at my destination, a small rest area with a gas station and a diner. Upon arrival, both places were closed, as it was around 1 a.m. by now. But I was able to place a call to my parents back home using a payphone. They answered with a swift "hello" after just a single ring. They were worried because I still had not called them. It felt like something had gone terribly wrong. After my intentionally brief explanation that my car had broken down and I was stranded, they told me that they were on their way. "Drive safe. I love you," I murmured before hanging up the phone. It was so hard to withhold my full experience, but I decided I wouldn't tell them. Not out of fear that they would think I was crazy. I didn't really care what anyone believed, but because I didn't want them making a dangerous rush on the way over. The last thing I needed was for them to be so worried that they drove recklessly and got into an accident. For an hour and a half, I sat completely still at the bench next to the payphone. I wasn't bothered. I wasn't freezing. My mother pulled the car over nearby, and my father retreated from the vehicle and ran up to me. "What the hell are you doing sitting out in the snow? You're gonna..." he exclaimed. My strong embrace interrupted his appropriate statement. I must have held on to him for too long and too hard, because normally he would have pulled away within a few seconds. But he didn't. My mum got out of the car next, and I shared a long hug with her as well. Wiping my tears, I motioned them into the vehicle, and we pulled away from the rest stop. The car ride home must have been incredibly difficult for my parents. The scenes I painted and the horror that I described was probably unlike anything that they'd ever heard before. I told them first about the car. Then I told them about my walk to the shack. And finally, I told them of my experience with the witch-like thing. They must have thought I was crazy, until I showed them the horrible mess that my head was. My mum nearly slammed on the brakes, exclaiming that we needed to go to a hospital. I pleaded with her to keep going. I wanted to get far away from this place before we stopped and did anything. To my mum's credit, she listened. We drove for an hour before I was comfortable with looking for a hospital. At the hospital, they explained the dire situation that I had been in. I was suffering from blood loss, hypothermia, and frostbite on the skin where that thing had attacked me. And now, I'd like to retract a statement that I previously made. I actually did care what the doctors believed, so I decided to not tell them my story about what had attacked me. These people actually had the power to institutionalize if they thought I was insane. So I told them that I had been attacked by a mountain lion. Somehow I convinced my parents to give the same story if anyone asked. Upon awaking after hours of treatment, a nurse informed me that a fragmental nail of the mountain lion that had attacked me had been removed during surgery. My jaw dropped. The possibility that I could have some real-life proof of whatever that thing was staggering. "Can I keep it, please?" I shouted. The nurse gave a puzzled look and said, "I'll check with the doctor, but I can't see why not." Minutes later, she returned with the foreign material in a clear canister and handed it to me. "Are you sure it was a mountain lion? I've seen a few mountain lion nails in my days, but none of them ever looked like that," said the nurse. "No, I guess I must have been wrong. It was so dark out there, you know," I replied. "Well, whatever that thing was, you're lucky to be alive," she said. Back at home a few days later, the pain was subsiding, and I had a lot of questions that needed to be answered. I didn't really know where to start though. Even in a big city, I'd imagine it's quite difficult to find good information on this thing. Not having much to go on, I set out for Susan's house. Susan was, how do I say this politely? The town nutcase. At least, that's what her reputation was. My mother always told me that my friends and I needed to stay away from her when we were kids. I never thought that all these years later, she would be the person I needed to see the most. I arrived at her front porch and I hesitated to knock. The last time I knocked on an unfamiliar door, it didn't end well. But I told myself that if I didn't get in contact with this woman, I might never find out more about what I had encountered, or if I was in future danger. I plucked up my courage and I knocked. A few moments passed, and then I heard the sound of the door unlocking. An old woman creaked the door open some and peered out through the opening. "Yes?" said the old woman. Are you Susan?" I replied. "Yes. Why? Who are you?" responded Susan. I know you don't know me, but I've been living in Baker a long time, and recently I had a very strange experience that I think you might want to hear about." She didn't say anything back. Fearing that she would shut me out, I pleaded with her. "Susan, please, I hate to waste your time, but I have some questions to ask. I'm afraid for my life. You're the only person I could come to." With that, the old woman shut her door and walked away. I was not about to give up though. I extended my arm, ready to knock on the door again. Just as I lifted my arm, I could hear the footsteps again, growing closer to the door. This time, Susan unlatched the door and welcomed me in. As soon as I entered her home, she made a command to stop with a motion of her hand, and I heeded her direction. From a nearby shelf, she produced a thin incense stick and a small bottle that appeared to be some kind of potion. She handed me the container. "Do not sip. "It is bitter," said Susan, as she motioned me to drink. I kind of thought she was kidding, but I was so desperate for answers that I didn't mind the humiliation. I took the shot of liquid in my hand and swallowed it. Oh, the taste made me cringe. Susan then proceeded to take a stick of incense and blow in wisps at my head, heart, and each of my hands and shoulders. "This is for my protection, not yours," she explained. I gave a nod in respect and allowed her to continue with her various ritualistic gestures. When she had completed, she invited me to sit at the couch across from her. "Tell me, what have you encountered?" asked Susan. Okay. I was on a trip to Billings. My car broke down and I was stranded in the woods a few nights ago. I was trying to find aid, and I stumbled upon this cabin that had these weird things all around it. Blood-stained scrolls, pendants, and this shrine. I realized I was in trouble, so I tried to leave, but a woman with these really long, thin arms and sharp nails attacked me. I was able to get away, but I fear that this isn't over. I'm afraid she's going to come back and haunt me or something like that." "How long ago was the attack?" Susan replied. "About 3 days ago," I answered. "So, you have been experiencing hallucinations and other paranormal phenomena then?" "No, I haven't. But the fear that I'm not out of danger, it keeps me up. I can't sleep." "Young man, you had an encounter with the Amwisak." "What the hell is that?" "The Amwisak. They are a group of dark summoners. They were once members of the Native American Chippewa tribe here in Montana, long ago. When a great snowstorm fell upon this region over 200 years ago, many children and infants within the tribe did not make it. Angered and desperate, a small group of tribeswomen prayed to the dark gods to revive the young ones who they lost. Their results were potent. The children were miraculously revived. When the rest of the Chippewa tribe discovered the truth about how they were saved, they killed the children. They cast out the band of dark women. Now, isolated from their former tribe, the women honed their craft, expanded their mystical capabilities. They used their powers to transform themselves into fearsome creatures that haunt, curse, and even kill. Young one, though it may appear that my knowledge is omnipotent, do not be fooled. I am puzzled." "You are?" I questioned. "Why?" "People who are attacked by Amwisak very rarely live to tell about it. And above that, those who survive suffer curses, haunting dreams for the rest of their lives. But you tell me that you do not encounter these same hardships. How can this be?" I racked my mind for reasons why I wasn't having such challenges. I almost wanted to give myself the credit, as it was my determination and strength that helped me to ward off the foe, get back to safety. I quickly checked my ego and rejected this idea. I couldn't possibly be stronger than a group of women who transformed themselves seemingly through magic. "Tell me," she continued, "did you take something from the beast? A sacred necklace? A scroll?" "No, definitely not," I replied hysterically. "As soon as I knew I was in danger, I left." No sooner had I said that, had I remembered. I did take something. even if not purposefully, I had in my possession one of its own talents. "Wait," I muttered as I reached into my coat pocket. I found the clear plastic container that encapsulated the monster's nail. I retrieved it from my pocket. "What is it?" Susan inquired with wonder. "They found it in my scalp during the surgery," I said. "I think it's its nail." She looked surprised. I began to open the container when suddenly she stopped me. "Stop," she exclaimed. "You mustn't handle it. There's no telling what powers this fragment can hold. One thing is clear though. You must keep this safe with you forever. This is what saved you from her. Without it, she is incomplete, powerless." Suddenly, it was all coming together. Susan was right. This nail is what saved me from it. It helped me to find the strength to deal a shocking blow. It helped me to run the long distance to the rest stop with incredible speed and endurance. It aided in calming me on my way to the payphone, when normally I should have been consumed by fear and pain. And now it seems it had saved me from being cursed or haunted for the rest of my life, like the others. All of this I explained to Susan. "It is apparent that even after being severed from its keeper," said Susan, "this object still possesses supernatural powers. Although I cannot prohibit you from experimenting with its energy, for you have righteously earned it, allow me to provide you with some sage advice. Beware things in which we do not fully understand. Be careful." I left Susan's house with a new sense of power and peace of mind. All of my questions had not really been answered though. Was there an expiry date on this thing? Would it fade away in a matter of weeks? Or would it last forever, so long as I didn't touch it and use its powers as my own? Although I understood so little about its mystical qualities, I felt a sense of confidence that I was going to be okay. The Amwisak were scattered all over the state. That's a fact I now had to live with. But I was convinced that as long as I kept this fragment in my possession at all times, they could not harm me. While my experience at the shack in the middle of nowhere undoubtedly changed me, it did not leave me crippled, haunted, or living with intense paranoia for the rest of my days. It helped me to experience a sensation that I've never had before. Absolute power, endurance, and will. In that moment, I experienced relative numbness. But looking back, I feel proud at what I had accomplished. Having conquered this most extreme of trials, I was ready to continue on with my plans, to leave town, to create a new life for myself. Now, unafraid of what challenges I might face.